So it's an interesting occasion for me, because when I heard about a place off Talgarth Road, oh, that's funny, and I had this memory of a place I've been to, perhaps in the late 80s, 1980s, something, which was a strange building, because it wasn't like a normal building. It has big windows and wooden floors. And I've been invited there to watch whirling dervishes. And they were down there. We had a kind of they were on a platform, and the rest of us were sitting here watching them. So it was there, these big windows. And it was an amazing performance, if you've ever seen these. Because you have I think about 8 participants who form like the planets circling in themselves, but also circling around a particular orbit. So everybody's rotating, going round and round and round, and they do this, and they go round and round and round, and it's a kind of it's a religious experience. They have one hand up, pointing to the heavens, and one hand down, pointing to the earth. A sense of you kind of channeling the spirit or God or divine, and you're bringing it into earth, and the human being acts as a kind of axis. In that, the axis is moving. Well, no, the axis is still, but everything around that axis is moving. Imagine everybody's quite still in some central place, otherwise they fall over, but everything around is moving. And this is the kind of harmony experience individually. And because they're all moving around together, they have to. So the whole thing has to. Each individual has to move in harmony with the rest, in this circle as they spin around. The thing is, they can't see anything, or very little, because they're moving so fast. All the visual field is blurred. They can't actually see very much apart from this blurring. In fact, if you look, you can get dizzy. So you just have to keep an eye. So they're doing this, moving in sync around this orbit without falling over, without colliding with each other. They have these kind of skirts which flare out, which have weights in the bottom of them to hold them down and lift up. So if that flying skirt touches somebody else, it throws them out. So they have to be a certain distance from each other, doing all this thing. And so I was watching it, and it went perfect. It went round and round and round. Nobody fell over, nobody touched anybody else. And at the end of it, they say you have to, when the music, there's somebody playing a oud or a violin or something in the background, everybody has to really rush together to hold each other up, because when you come out of that amount of spinning, you're completely disoriented. So the whole group has to just condense into one group, but holding each other up to stop falling over. Yeah. So it was a wonderful experience to watch, because they say in that experience you can't have any thinking, you can't have any internal movement, you can't have any movement of mind. Your heart has to be completely quiet in order to be totally open and sensitive, receptive to the flow of the movements of humans in this particular way. And that to them was their sense of the religious experience. Your heart is still and open, sensitive. Everything, the world around you is whirling, and you're working in harmony. I thought that was a lovely presentation. Mm-hmm. We're not going to do that today. But it's a nice idea that you can be in a whirling world, not being able to see what's going on or figure out what's going on, and yet maintain stillness, balance, harmony and sensitivity. Mm-hmm. That's the piece, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So some kind of movements are supportive for stillness, and some kind of stillness is quite happy with movement. And that's the That's the stillness of the spirit. Conditions, thoughts, sensations, sights, sounds, they can all shift and change, but something that acts as a balancing point within all that never moves, no matter how fast it goes, or how slow it goes. And clearly this is kind of what our life is, isn't it, really? We're just so much in movement. Obviously the world around us is constantly shifting and changing at different speeds. Machinery, traffic, cars. Then you get subtler movements like the sunshine coming up and down. You get weather changing, everything tangible, visible, auditory is moving, shifting all the time. And of course internally, there's this kind of whirling of thoughts which are trying to kind of calculate and orient and regulate this experience, thinking, which has a tremendous spin of itself. That's moving, and also we are moved. That is, something touches our hearts and we are aroused, alarmed, pressurized, comforted, satisfied, joyful. We move and are moved. And the theme of cultivation is within all that, within the very movements of our hearts and thoughts. Can there be stillness? Stillness doesn't try to even stop them. Stillness of, in some ways you could call it dispassion, not getting excited by it. You could also call it compassion, being open and receptive to it, listening to it without finding fault with it. Good heart. These are qualities that help us to sustain that poise, axis. So much movement is voluntary. We deliberately move, walk, touch, speak, lie down, do something voluntary. We voluntarily decide to think about something, give it attention. Our minds jog along a particular track, trying to find a track. And some it's involuntary. Some you find something in you jumps or surges or sinks. But involuntary. Dream. Images arise, movements arise, changes arise. Notice without that movement, what would that be? For start, you can't actually have thought which doesn't move. If you sustain one thought, it loses meaning. It just doesn't. You've got to get it moving. Well, it has to move in order to be a proper thought. You can't have a still thought. It doesn't exist. You can think slowly. You can regulate the thought. But you can't have a still. If that function stops, if thought stops, then it's silent. Maybe sometimes we enjoy that. That enjoyment is a kind of movement of the heart. We enjoy silence, enjoy stillness, and the heart is moved, feels joyful, feels comfortable, feels happy. If that movement has come through skillful means. Now the other, though when we're very pressurized, we definitely want stillness or something to calm us down. Can you imagine what it would be like if you couldn't move? Either paralyzed or imprisoned. Couldn't move. It would be torture, wouldn't it? So we don't really want stillness on any account. We want stillness that comes through things feeling comfortable and settled, not just through a rest and check. Yeah? And when we contemplate movement, particularly the movement that we're involved with, we're associated with certain emotional patterns. Either we feel on an optimal state, we're comfortably rolling along. We're in our groove, we're soothing, we're in a comfortable place. A lot of time movement's associated with pressure to get somewhere, to arrive somewhere. It's associated with the, I wish I could get to that final place where things will be steady, which is a bit of a fantasy. There's that pressure to arrive at that final place where I could settle down. No, because when you arrive at that final place, what you think is the final place, the energy that took you to that place, if it's searching for finality, will think, just one more detail. If I get that sorted out, if I get the decoration right, if I get the furniture right, if I get the body right, then it'll be fine. Because the movement that is craving for stillness never arrives there. It thinks it's going to arrive there, but if we do arrive at a place where we sit down and think, right, that's it, no more work to do today, and just, I just remembered something. I ought to do that. I've got this great idea. And so the movement towards stillness can't be done through craving, because craving, we don't necessarily detect it, acts as a kind of a taint that remains, a stain that remains. So it remains as an underlying blueprint. Even in the craving to not crave, it's still craving. So there has to be this sense of dispassion. Although it's certainly, we look for security and stasis and a stable place, we don't going to get there through craving. But the Buddha said there is a stable place, and you get there through non-craving. And that involves dispassionate openness to movement, change, feeling, sensation, without being pressurized by it. So when we seek the absence of movement, we don't really want the absence of movement, we want the absence of pressure. Feeling pressed, pushed. Or frustrated, We want to get there and we can't. Can't get there, it's so frustrating, this doesn't work. It's broken down, she's turned up late, it's so frustrating. So, how many of those happen? And these are often happening. We quickly do something to change something, make a phone call, find a key, ask somebody what to do. And it's kind of constantly dealing with the frustration. Often dealing with labour-saving devices. Trying to figure out how they work. And then finding out something's gone wrong. So we have to sense, forget labour-saving. The way you save labour is by stop labouring, but learn to moderate your emotional pressure and you open your capacity to deal with and live with the unfinished, the uncertain, the unsatisfactoriness. That's the essence of the Buddha's teaching, because if you learn to live with that particular quality of presence that's able to cope with this, that is your refuge, that is your still place. There isn't one anywhere else. And any movement towards it will be either pressurizing it, locking it, getting frustrated, not being able to get there, defending it against things. I was just getting settled down and then something happened. But we move and we are moved. And when there is movement, when we move, there's always some residue. We leave footprints. This is both very obvious in our physical lives. We do affect other people. Every day we do something, we're leaving some kind of imprint on the planet, on each other. Just our very breathing out is affecting the atmosphere. And just the warmth of your body is affecting things. You're sitting in a room together, it warms up, not because you're trying to do it, it's just that's what happens. So we are inevitably a source of effects, voluntary or involuntary. We leave traces, we leave residues. And those residues, those traces then affect. So you get cause, effect. The effect leads to another cause. Because I'm moved by that, touched by that, affected by that, I do this. And that leaves an effect because I'm affected by this and that, I do this. So this goes on. This is called karma. Movement that keeps replicating itself through leaving traces and residues. And these naturally build up, these traces and residues. Some of it's just functional. I know how to get to the tube station. I know how to use an Oyster card. I've learned that. That's stuck there. That's in place. Helpful. There's a certain amount of that that's helpful, and a certain amount of it just becomes overwhelming. When you've got to go through a 14-page website to just fill in a visa. Get a visa or something like that. It's just really, get an appointment with a doctor, you've got to sit down and do a 10-page website thing. So, the amount of data. So the more data we get in, then of course the mind has to keep jumping to process the data and learn how to do it. So this is, so it's say functional, and because of the evocative nature of movement, and particularly its moving thought, how the very energy of thought moving, shifting, tends to, whether it's good or bad, it stirs everything. It stirs everything. The body and the somatic. The bodily intelligence, the body energy gets stirred by it, and the heart gets stirred by it. Without necessarily any moral or ethical results as such, but it's still activated. And in an activated state, we sort of lose some of the capacity for independent movement. Because I'm so plugged into filling in the forms and punching the tickets and getting the numbers right and answering the questions, I can't actually think straight because, so the autonomy gets lost because I'm just basically puppet on a string. So, this isn't a moral issue, but it's a renunciation issue, which is a very important thing to turn over in your mind. Because if you don't cultivate some degree of restraint and renunciation, you're just jelly. You're just scrambled. But naturally, what we see, touch, hear, read about, are promised, excites us, moves us, so we do get seduced by it all. It's one of the fundamental principles of cultivation is you have to do restraint, you have to do it. Otherwise, you just don't have independence, you don't have autonomy. You're just bouncing around like a ball in a pinball machine. So that need just to learn how to feel the pull, feel the earth, and then just Switch off, very important. If we cultivate this alone, this is going to give us freedom. And it's important to frame, what we call in renunciation or restraint in that way. This isn't about a prison. This is about freedom. This isn't about not having any fun. This is about having freedom and joy to see things differently. This isn't about moralizing. This is just about sanity. Right? So with this eye, we kind of look around and think how much everything that seems to be a thing, whether it's a cup or a phone or whatever, is actually something that moves me. Something that requires my movement. It has to be clean, tidied, fixed, looked at, studied, remembered where it is, not forgotten. It's going to involve some kind of momentum to cooperate with it. In other words, it doesn't belong to you. You belong to it. Right? You get your car and your car says, "Hello, feed me." Feed me petrol, feed me oil, feed me tax, feed me money, polish me, clean me, take me to the MOT, get moving. You can drive from here to Birmingham, but it's gonna, that's what I can do. But you're going to spend a good amount of time dealing with what it takes to get that thing moving and the results of it. So we look at it and think, is it really worth it? How much is worth it? These are questions to keep alive in your mind. And even to ask those questions requires enough independence to step back from the momentum of events and pressures and urgencies and just wait a minute, what am I doing? Was it useful? Is it going? How much of this is useful? Just have that. So this restraining leads to some potential for adjusting where you're going and how you're going and who you're going with. Because all of those, without any kind of moral thing involved with it, all those are bound to have effects that move you around. And there's a certain amount of that movement when it's in harmony. Oh yes, fine. Those dervishes, but they span in harmony, they whirled in harmony on a prescribed axis. When you're going in 5 different directions at once, with different things coming in different, sights, sounds, memories, thoughts, occupations. This is going to be a Thursday, I've got to do this tomorrow, she needs that, I better phone him, I've got my to-do list. They're kind of cascading in. You don't have the harmonious whirling, you have the scrambled experience, and nothing. So it's not a harmonious movement, it's a set of discords that clash. So that sense of restraint, pruning to get the space to be able to be more discerning. This alone, you see, because when we make more really, very important choices, which is what about karma is about, which is based upon, you could say, ethical sensitivity. Now, if the mind is too jammed, it doesn't do it. It can't do it. That's why I think there is so much prevalence of, violence and abuse, lying, deceit is absolutely paramount and in your face every day. Every day. We're all aware of that. And because it's the flood of information and data that keeps the mind so bamboozled that we don't return to the heart. The heart's lost under that tumult. The quiet inner voice of our conscience gets deafened by the babble of promise, aggression, rants, dogma, ideologies, the thing. All of them promising us finality, happiness, success, and thinking. That doesn't go there. It doesn't go there. So, stepping back from the world, and then we thought, well, then we're able to kind of really contemplate that an innate sense that we have. This is fundamentally the three, that's my reflection, which is subject to alteration. There's three very fundamental heart capacities. One is ethical sensitivity, we care for each other. We have a sense of things where the heart feels free and steady, and it's a sense of almost a stillness of ethical. There's no need to flee, there's no need to apologize, there's no need to blame, there's no need to... I'm free from this pressure of regret. The heart regrets. If we return to that, for sure, I'm sure most of us have some kind of regret or another. I think we didn't do enough of, we didn't say thank you to that person before they died. Memories of how we were to our parents or whatever wasn't always so good, and and then that stays, because that level of the heart is where all the residues of action and lack of action, or all the disharmonies, stay in the heart, the kind of underpinning process of thought and action. If we're so caught up with thought and action, we don't actually touch into those residues, then we can acting on without conscience and concern, and without learning anything. That wasn't so skillful, don't do it again. Because when we return to those residues, as we do, whenever we cultivate any kind of meditation, well, Buddhist meditation anyway, you're going to come into those residual qualities. And of course, just a reminder, it's certainly not all bad news. We can also experience the gratitude, how we have been pleasantly moved, comforted, soothed, uplifted, supported by other people. We can also make an effort to acknowledge that we have many times deliberately intended for the welfare of others, to live in a pure way or good way, kindly. So both of those are there. So we have this kind of ethical sense which is trying to remind us and come back to where we go out of balance. Because if we're in balance, my understanding, if we're in balance, the mind is naturally ethically sensitive. Heart is ethically sensitive. Because to be in balance, the heart, the nature of heart is it's relational. It means the heart is always a kind of a system that's saying, there's this and there's that, how's that? How are you with me? How's this with that? Where's the feeling? Where's it going to work? It seeks homeostasis. How's it going to be comfortable? That's its nature. It's a very direct participatory organ. Now, thinking mind is abstraction. 7 of these, 8 of those, tomorrow, Thursday. They've got no actual, they don't mean anything. They're just noises that we can use to steer by. But when it comes down to what you're left with the memories, the perceptions, good, so forth. So, because that's the nature of heart. It's about relationship, about what we touch by and what we bring forth. And the heart is going to seek that which feels harmonious. Right? Like if it's the same system we have in the body. When you stand up, Your body does not want you to fall over. You don't have to decide. If you start tipping over, it will make a very rapid attempt to get you upright again. It's not some kind of rule we have to tell it to do, it does it. Yeah? And the heart's pretty much the same. If it tips over, then it's going to try to get back to harmony. So we say, oh, I'm sorry, oh, I forgot, I'm sorry about that. We seek forgiveness to try to get back. Or we say, that was a silly thing to do, don't do it again. We want to get back. So the heart always wants to get back to that balance where there's an evenness, a homeostasis, a suitable relationship with oneself and whatever was involved with. And in this sense, you know, as we cultivate this what I call ethical sensitivity, the first heart principle, you can extend it. It's huge. It's just me and my friends, my parents, my children, my workmates, okay, guy in the street, people I serve, anybody in the tube train, may they be well, if after you please, looks like you need a hand, you know, and then creatures, animals, planet, you know, basically the sky's the limit. Yeah. And also, in the long term, what's going to happen if I keep going like this for the next 25 years? What's going to be the long-term causes? So we also consider that. Yeah. So then the heart, if it covers, you know, this, what we say, it's felt space and it's felt time, it gets very stable and very assured because it's created a mandala, a template, a zone. You know, this is good now, it'll be good in the future, as good as it can be. Leaves no painful resonances. It's something to cultivate, and we can cultivate very, you know, begin with the modest stuff, you know, refrain from the stealing, lying, bad speech, gossiping, you know, and this is, you know, in some ways, the most fundamental one. Because, you know, however physically violent you are, you still can't do as much violence with your body as you can with your tongue. And, you know, you can spread that tongue violence on the internet to cause pain for millions of people. And it's not just like, it's gossiping, it's stereotyping, it's caricaturing, it's bad-mouthing. And then you think, you try to cultivate what I'm saying. If I recorded it and played it back, you know, what I'm saying, if I recorded and played it, how did it sound to me? And does it lead to something fortunate, or is it just me dumping some agitation, dumping a bit of anger? Well, there's better places to dump your anger than in speech. That's what heart is for. Because it has several other capacities. First of all, the second capacity is the capacity for love. You know, you can't love with a thought. You know, and what does this mean? It means both you care for, you see the vulnerability of other beings, you see they're innately unique and something so wonderful, you know, to be sharing your time with other beings who are like you and yet different flavours to it. What would it be like if there was nobody else around? You know? How bleak. And certainly in my life I'm very privileged because I'm 95% of the people I'm with are benevolent beings. And that's allowed the heart to really come out of fear and worry and guilt and self-criticism, just because other beings receive and encourage and support and give, and then one does the same. And the heart feels properly moved, properly moving. Yeah. even to the extent of other animals. So where I live, my little shed, a little kuti, I have a window and I sit there in the morning, just as the light coming up, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and sometimes you see the deer, they come up towards my kuti and start nibbling the leaves. And I'm just thinking, why should this give me so much joy? But it does. Just what it'd be like if there were no other animals on this planet. Oh no. You know, how bleak, how heartless, how lacking in joy and wonder that it would be. And how can you experience those nourishing qualities of joy, wonder, delight without others, human others, animal others, trees even. I love the trees doing their thing. And you think, this feeds me. The heart needs feeding. So it's given its stillness by ethics. So, this is where I stand. It's given its movement, its happy movement of heart through love, that's compassion, well-wishing, deep appreciation, and even the serenity to say, okay, that's the way she is, may she be well. Who knows, equanimity or serenity. So these you're nourished. And when your heart is nourished, then our sense appetites tend to drop, because you don't need it. You don't bother. You need to have all kinds of data coming. I don't need to have all kinds of sights and sounds and tastes going on. I don't really mind what flavour it is. It's just good enough, because the heart is nourished, the body is nourished, everything's nourished, and almost by themselves the residual hungers diminish. So you begin to eliminate some of the sources of craving just through ethics, because I don't have to keep doing things to justify my existence. I know where I am. And also the qualities of love. I don't have to crave taste, touch, sight, thoughts, visual objects, going places, because I'm happy. So those sources of craving. And we don't need our sense of self-image fades. Like, I don't need to be the greatest or the best or the worst. I don't have to define myself, because that need to make sure I'm okay, I am okay. Not because I've done something to make myself okay, because I've returned to the only place that can be okay, ever, which is this heart, citta. So that process of returning to the heart and purification or cleaning and nourishing the heart, this is all, we call this meditation. And let's not forget discernment, wisdom. We may think this is an intellectual quality, and we've got good ideas. And that's so, except, it's a hard quality in that you have to measure things against a template. So you measure the distance with a ruler. I've got this ruler, these little lines on it, 5, 6, 7, 8, that's 8. So you measure things, you've got something to measure things against, right? That's how you measure things. And so if we measure something like 5, 6, 7, 8, you're measuring against, say, a ruler or a stick or a tape. Okay, that's accurate. It's not inaccurate. Okay, it's clear, it's not blurred, it's discernment. But it's also totally meaningless. And so is the heart, isn't it? 8 what? What's that got to do with me? Applying the abstract measurements, which we're very gifted in, then you get things which are just abstract. They don't actually go to the heart. So wisdom is actually measuring things. How does that feel? And where does that land? Where does that come from? How does that go? And what kind of qualities go along with that interest, that intention? How does that feel? How does that movement feel to you? How do you, is it rough? Is it smooth? Is it sharp? Is it twisted? Is it poisonous? Is it smooth? Is it loving? You're getting very wise, but you're using the heart as the template to measure things against, not just the ruler or the scales or these machines or these mechanized devices which are dead. Right? Where the heart is alive. So you measure something against a living reality, felt reality. As long as we measure things in terms of names, numbers, weights, sizes, definable qualities like that, we are measuring ourselves against death. We'll be utterly perfect, but we'll be completely dead. How much money do you have? Dead. Yeah. But of course, abstract measurements are very easy. You just whip out the tape measure, whip out the whatever it is, the measuring thing, and it's subtle forms of measurement. Measurements against ideas. Are you the great person? What's that? It's an idea. Are you the successful person? That's an idea. Measuring yourself against ghosts. And always the ghost is always right, and you're always wrong. What kind of reality is that? And yet, on a subtle level, perhaps not very subtle, we can measure ourselves against the ghost of should be, the should be ghost, or the should have been ghost. The should have been. How can you be a should have been? But I should have been. I should have known better. I should have got that right. I should have prepared that in advance. I should have got there on time. I should have said that. I shouldn't have said that. We're measuring ourselves against this ghost of something that didn't actually happen. So when you get the should-haves going, say, okay, that's a ghost. Now what's the living reality, this quiver of ethical concern? That's fine. Okay? You want to know that. Lost balance there. Then you can deal with it directly. Just let go of that. Begin to work upon the feeling of inadequacy, regret, lack, or I want to be this great being. Work against these craving fantasies or these regret spectres that haunt us when you come down to something real, living, unique, and indefinable. And that is the aim of contemplative wisdom, is not to arrive at a defined, you are now this, to arrive at an endlessly undefined, don't need to define, because that's free. Everything's defined is defined by a measurement, right? How do you feel? How's it happening for you? Do you know that? In that sense of doubt, Maybe I could, perhaps I ought to be. Maybe I should be, am I a stream enterer? Will never be a stream enterer. Can a lay person be a stream enterer? I'll be an arahant. Maybe I'm not an arahant. Maybe there's no such thing. Maybe it doesn't matter. Perhaps I should give up. Just try to not be reborn as a turtle. Maybe that's good enough for a humble person like me. Look at the doubt, searching for definition. What is it that searches for definition? You contemplate craving to be, and recognizing that beast, that Mara, that demon. How's that feel? Now you have a very profound measuring system. Wisdom, love, integrity. When those say, we're not bothered, we're not flustered, we're comfortable, and you know that. And the movements of craving cease. And this is what the Buddha pointed to. You know? It's kind of beautiful and very kind of simple. It's often extremely frustrating. I think, does this mean, is this a kind of limitless consciousness? Or is this an unbounded awareness of a non-dualistic essence? Let me get a definition around. No, you can't define it. Well, that undefinable, is it a something or is it a nothing? No, you can't define it. But how do you know you're there? You can't define it. You know it's there because you stop trying to define it. That's what's there. And you feel peaceful. So people have been kicking this one out ever since the Buddha said you can't define it. They've been trying to define it. This thing runs deep. So if you want some definition, look in terms of simple things like measuring precepts and what they relate to. Measuring quality of capacity for love, compassion, sympathy, forgiveness, contentment, measuring those. Measuring capacity for, I can honestly own up, I can sense this, I can feel this. So wisdom is a non-intellectual thing, it just means clarity. Clarity around what's really moving us. If you want measurements, that's what you measure things by. And they come by themselves. You can feel whatever movement there is, which is natural to the sensory world, natural to the thinking mind, it goes its own way, and we remain awake, balanced within that.